God be with you. Good morning. Welcome. I'd like you just to wave your hand. There's people online. We want them to know we know you're there, and we want you to let us know when you have questions and stuff. We will be told. So welcome to Hillhurst United Church. I'm John Pentland, one of the ministers here. We welcome you to our Going Deeper series, which we've done in various different ways with theological colleges in Atlantic School of Theology, Vancouver School of Theology, and today Emmanuel College in Toronto. Our community has four practices we seek to value and live out. That's hospitality. So you hope you've already tasting wonderful breakfast put together by Elaine Moses and Nancy Watt, who are here. So thank you for that, hospitality. You're welcome to that throughout the morning. Spirituality is the second value we seek to live. We recognize religion's got a bad name in the world, but we seek to live good religion by seeking to offer good theology and good understanding of who we are as God's people. The third is social justice. We got to take what we say and sing out into the world. If it stays in the walls of the church, we're sunk. So we need to take what we say and sing and learn to transform the world in love. And the fourth practice is risk. We take a risk. It wasn't much of a risk for you to come today. What a beautiful day. There might have been other temptations, and hopefully you get to fulfill those later today in the beautiful outdoors, but we welcome you. We're also an affirming community of faith that says essentially you're welcome and you belong just as you are, regardless of age, stage, sexual orientation, gender. These pews, as difficult as they might be sometimes, say you belong and you're loved. We're also recognized that we're on Treaty 7 land, the confluence of the Elba and the Bow River, and we are called to be about education. Murray Sinclair would say, learning each other's stories and traditions and rituals so that we might better fully understand who was here before us, who we are, and who will be here after us. So that's a lot about who we are, and I welcome you. This morning, HyeRan will be introduced by John in a moment, but there will be, she's set it up in 4 parts, and there'll be chances for us to talk to each other, but there'll be an official break at 10:30. And for those of you who are visiting, we've got construction happening eternally here, but the kingdom is coming, and we will have a building someday. But you go down here, and to your left, there's gender-neutral washrooms. You're welcome to that. You know, the practice of today is I'm just so delighted you came. Migration is such an important issue, and the stories we're going to learn, it's part of our tradition and our understanding. It couldn't be, as someone said, more opportune time than this to do that. And I want to just acknowledge Janet Frolish, who's here, and Peter Kelsch. Well, just wave your hand if they know, and John, who help both the spiritual nurture and, in this case, the link and bridge to social justice ministries. Our church has many significant ministries in social justice, and that's part of who we are. And we're sort of sponsoring that. If you're saying, what do I pay? Well, you already did. If you offer a gift to the church, a donation, this is how we support this program. So your offering is one of the ways it says that you would like to see this happen here. And so we thank you for your donation to that. If you haven't done that and you'd like to, we're never going to say no to a donation. So if you're inspired, go home, or during today, go on your phone and make a donation. It's a way of saying we appreciate this. So I would like to invite John to come forward. John Glennie has part of our community for over a decade, and he's always one of the hospitable people in our church who welcomes and supports things that are going on. So I'm going to invite him, then I'm going to have something to do, and then HyeRan will be here. So John.
Thank you, John. John and John. There's several other Johns down here too, I know, this morning, so the place is full of Johns. I should thank John Pentland, our lead minister here at Hillhurst, for a number of years for actually setting this series up. Over the years, we have the chance as congregants here or as visitors to this sanctuary to hear speakers from the various theological colleges. John has mentioned them across Canada that are affiliated with the United Church of Canada. And so I know I look forward each year to see who's going to be coming for this Going Deeper series. And we're spoiled, I think, because we can sit here in the pew and listen and interact. And we don't have to travel to a conference in Toronto or Winnipeg or Vancouver. We can just stay here, and John arranges for these people to come to us. So thank you for doing this, John. Going deeper, HyeRan arrived here yesterday. It was +10 in Calgary, as you know, and she left Toronto 4 hours before that, and it was -10 or -15 in Toronto, and they had 55 centimeters of snow in the last week. So I felt as if the phrase going deeper should be changed to perhaps going warmer or going higher for this particular weekend, but you can think about that. But I know we'll go deeper in our hearts and our mind and our heads as we listen to HyeRan today. So I'm very honored to introduce her to you. She comes as the principal of Emmanuel College, which is the United Church Theological College in Toronto. And it's part of the Toronto School of Theology. This is very complicated. And the Toronto School of Theology is part of the University of Toronto. So there's a multi-layered administration there. A little bit about her academic background. She's from South Korea. She was raised in Seoul, and she graduated with her first degree in divinity, was a Master of Divinity from Hanshin University in Seoul. She then was courageous enough to travel halfway around the world to Toronto to do further graduate study in theology. And so she obtained a doctorate in theology from Emmanuel College in Toronto. She returned to Korea and taught briefly at her alma mater for a few years there. And the lure of Canada brought her back here to Saskatoon, where she taught for over 10 years at the theological school in Saskatoon. Professor of preaching was her main assignment, I think, there. She did mention to us last night that her family, when they were in Saskatoon, loved to go camping in the mountains. And so they drove through Calgary quite often to get to Banff or Jasper. And they didn't stop in Calgary. They just went right through Calgary to get to Banff so they could camp. But we have her trapped this weekend here in Calgary, so we won't let her get to Banff this time. In 2019, she went from Saskatoon to Toronto, back to Emmanuel, to become a professor there of preaching in 2019. And then in 2022, she was appointed principal of Emmanuel College. And that's one of the most significant positions, I think, in the United Church of Canada, being principal of that particular theological college. Some of the words and phrases that pop up in her reading about her writing are biblical interpretation, antiracism, postcolonial theories, feminist homiletics. Homiletics is a fancy word for preaching. Immigration, connecting the ecological crisis to preaching, and intercultural relations. She's published 15 books and written more than 50 articles. And her theme for today is especially topical, I think, crossing and belonging. And I think that's a wonderful phrase the more you think about those words, crossing and belonging. And in these days where there are so many borders and boundaries being erected, the need for crossing those and trying to find a sense of belonging is certainly important. So we look forward to her comments about that. Finally, she's married to David Kim-Cragg, and they have 2 children, live in Toronto. And when asked about her hobbies, she said, I like to go walking, I like to bike. Like the man behind me here, she bikes to work in Toronto when she's able to with the weather. From where she lives, about a 20-minute bike ride. So she's another biker. And then she said she watches K-dramas. And that's the first time I'd heard that phrase. I know K-pop is all around us, so she may tell you what K-dramas are, or you can ask her later about that. So please extend a warm welcome to Dr. HyeRan Kim-Cragg.
to our church, this is something we do every week, and it's just to take a moment to speak to somebody near you. And I encourage you to, here's the question of the day: why are you here? So in particular, look to somebody you don't know. Say your name, how you are, and why you're here. Just stand up. Why are you here?
No, I didn't do anything.
Okay, I want to just catch.
Yeah, yes, I didn't do anything.
No worries.
Yeah. Suppose
We're
agree?
all good now. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No, we're all good. I wanted to catch up before you.
Oh, yes.
Here.
Oh,
Okay.
I love the buzz. And it's very hard to stop because it's a wonderful thing that you are talking and greeting and sharing your morning. So I am deeply honored to be here. I thank Reverend Dr. John Pentland for this wonderful invitation. I heard about that because Emmanuel College, 3 faculty were invited last year, and they were so sharing amazing things about this congregation and their time with you last year. So I am very, very grateful. So greetings from Toronto, Emmanuel College, staff and faculty and students and alumni, and there are so many people who are really watching your ministry as a model, as a leader in the congregation. So I am deeply honored for this invitation, and another John who is just embodying the radical hospitality is, from driving me from the airport to here and sharing the stories about this congregation and all about. So thank you very much. And some of social justice ministry folks I met last night, that was another fabulous sharing time. And so thank you so much for that. So, you know, you came in and you probably saw some of the brochures. I'm doing official duty as a principal of Emmanuel College to promote. Emmanuel College is the largest theological school among United Church of Canada, and as a theological school, mainline theological schools in North America, we are very established. About 10 and 15 years, our school, we are still training United Church of Canada ministry personnel to be, or doctoral studies, but we also branch to embrace religious plurality that is so strong in Canada. And so 10 years ago, we studied Buddhist spiritual care focus, and then 15 years ago, we studied Muslim spiritual care. So in our basic degree programs, as you see, there are it's very small, but you can just, QR code is there, you can just check and find out a little bit more. So, and those master's degrees are really important for theological training, but also professional degrees to be chaplains, counselors, psychotherapists, and so on. And students are amazing, and we really learn to listen to different traditions and try to create a community that all different religious traditions can coexist without fighting over, which is what's happening in the world. We also have a PhD program as well as several other advanced degree programs in a very, very diverse faculty and with their amazing scholarly work and committed to teaching and service for the world. So I have a favor to ask you. There's a brochures. Please don't take me back to Emmanuel College. So if you want to keep it, if you have somebody you think that might be interested in theological studies or being a ministers, but also a spiritual care person, seekers, and so on. We have a Christian, Buddhist, and Muslim focus, but then we also have interreligious focus. So we have a Jewish students who wants to do interreligious because there are commonalities within, both scriptural and cultural and historical. So those are really awesome, challenging, but much needed work. So I'm very proud to be serving and leading our school in that environment. One of the only school in Canada and one of the very few theological schools in North America that are doing this. And we are doing really well. We have to turn some of the applicants away because we cannot hold everybody in. So it's a very good news, and God is good with that. So thank you. And so please take some. There's some pens as well, and then QR code. And so I know that another guest coming from another school next week, so you don't want to have that and that together. They wouldn't be very hospitable. So please do your job, and I would be very, very grateful for that. So and Andrew is our admission officer, and he's amazing, and you can just email or tell your friends or colleagues or whoever that you think it'd be good for them to seek and find out about our school. Next, the theme that is crossing and belonging. It's very interesting that I used to say belonging and crossing. You belong and then you cross. But this word in 21st century is the opposite. Don't you think? You meet your wonderful people because they already crossed. And then they are looking for a home, looking for a community. They feel a sense of belonging. That's the world that we are living, and I know you are already doing it. Amazing. I'm just so blown away how much the Hillhurst United Church is doing to do that crossing and belonging. So in some ways, I'm here to learn with and from you as much as I give some of the lessons. But still, hopefully, some of that I offer might be helpful for your ongoing ministry. So to do that, I have to invite you to have exercise your imagination. Okay? So I'm going to share 4 stories from the Bible. And if you don't know Bible, that's fine. And if you do know Bible, that's also new and fresh perspective, hopefully. So the way that I do this is that it's almost like as if I am that person in that story. Okay? So identifying yourself with that biblical character in the story. And then think about the emotion and empathy, like how I feel similar or different, right? Those are really wonderful way to engage in scripture. And then think about the theme of crossing and belonging and how this character is doing that. Okay? So there is a little bit of quiz. If you don't know the story, then who'd that be? And then there is an answer to it. And if you already know, then maybe this approach might be good to try in the future. Okay, not yet. Okay. So I'm telling the story as if I'm that person, okay? So first person narrative. Once upon a time, I was a girl, full of dreams. I had a dream of finding someone to love, someone who loves me, someone who I could have a child, 1 or 2 or more, and raise them well. I also had a dream of freedom freedom to travel and live where I felt at home. I am a slave. I am a migrant. I left my home country and found a place to live as a maid. My mistress and my master tried to have children, but they didn't have much luck. One day, my mistress called me and ordered me to sleep with her husband because she felt that she is too old to have children. I felt my dream was shattered. I had no choice, though, but to follow her order. I shed tears on my bed for many, many nights. The pregnancy was difficult enough, but an even harsher reality I had to face was my mistress' bad treatment. She was so mean to me that I could not bear it anymore. I ran into a wilderness, nowhere to go. I felt lost. I didn't know what to do. Then God appeared and promised to bless me and my baby. God's voice and presence were so warm and caring. God understood what I was going through. This very God convinced me to go back and try to live with my mistress and my master again. With God's help, I took the courage and to go back. I was very nervous and worried about returning, but I did. I think I had the strength in me. I was young and I could do this. I needed a place to deliver my baby and their baby. So I did. I gave my son a name meaning God heard. As I know that God heard my cries. 10 years went by. Oh my, something remarkable thing happened. Much to my surprise and shock to everybody else, my mistress became pregnant and gave birth to a son. So I was really hoping that our two children would get along well and grow up together well, but that was not possible. It was best that I leave the house. My master actually agreed this time, and it'd be best that you find another place. He seemed struggling with that decision. Being in the wilderness again was more difficult than first time. I faced lack of food. The bread and the water that my master packed for me was soon depleted. My confidence turned into fear under the heat of the sun. My child and I cried and cried out loud. I felt death coming very close to us. Then I heard the voice. That voice that I heard many moons ago. The same warm and caring voice asking, "What's the matter? Do not be afraid. I have heard your crying and your son's crying. He's lying there. Lift him up and take him by the hand. And because I will make him into a great nation." Then God opened my eyes and pointed out a well of water. So I went and filled the skin with water and gave it to my son to drink. I remember then the promise that God made when I was in the wilderness first time. Yes, God said that my son will have descendants too numerous to even count. This God, which had now spoken to me twice. So I named that God, the one who sees me. This amazing God was with my son as he grew up With God's help, he lived in the desert and became an archer. This awesome God seems to have always have been with me, guiding me, rooting for me. God looked after me and kept a constant and caring watch over me, like a star in the night sky. Do you know the name of this woman? A migrant, a slave? Her name is Hagar, and her son's name is Ishmael. Do you want to know more about this woman? Then open the Bible, the first book, Genesis, in chapter 16 and 21. And then Galatians 4, that's another story. So Hagar gave birth to Ishmael, which means God heard. Hagar was a migrant from Egypt to Canaan. She was an Egyptian slave. God loved her and blessed her and her child. Hagar is a really important foremother in Islam. And Ishmael is a very revered figure in Muslim traditions. I don't know about you, they have to do the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. That's the kind of duty, if you can, at least in your lifetime, you should do that. And in that pilgrimage journey, there is a well that Hagar found thanks to God. And so they always pay respect in that spot. So I heard those beautiful stories from our Muslim students and faculty members about how important Hagar is and Ishmael. However, it's odd, isn't it, that we don't know about this person as much. It's true that white and Eurocentric Christianity has not paid much attention to Hagar and her son, and actually painted negative stereotypes of her. Our dominant Christianity seems to have identified more closely with Sarah and her son Isaac rather than Hagar and Ishmael. This is in part because when you read Galatians 4, St. Paul really have a dualistic understanding. And that Sarah is a free woman and Hagar is the slave, and we belong to Sarah rather than Hagar. So it shows it. But that's not actually what Genesis says. So from that on, I think we took kind of granted for, more associating, identify with Sarah. However, when you read and learn about Afro-American Christianity, especially womanist tradition and their wisdom, Hagar is one of the most important persons for them to seek wisdom and getting strength from her courage, her perseverance, her hope, and her faith in God. In my book, Encounters, I called her the first theologian in the Bible because it's Hagar who named God. And what was it? The name of God is God who sees me. The God who sees us and love and bless us. So despite being racialized as Black, despite her gender being female, despite being classist as a slave, Hagar crossed all the barriers and all the kind of challenges and still find a way to belong and raise the kid that became one of the most important people in our ancestors of faith that God provided. So, next. This is a time for little small group discussions. So maybe group of 5, 3, 4, whatever you can form. And there are 3 questions, but doesn't need to be this one. You just think about what kind of lessons and insights that you heard about and from Hagar and her story. In what ways you can relate to her life or the life that you know of with asylum seekers, and there's so many people that you care for, right? And any story that you might to your own experience of encountering God, similarly or differently. Would that be good?
I'm going to encourage you to do the whole room, and I'm going to say groups of three. So, okay, groups of three, and use the whole space. I'm going to take how long?
About 3 people? So maybe,
3 people.
yeah, about 10 to 15 minutes. So I'll call you back.
Okay, use the whole space. Go to people you don't know. Use the space so you can hear each other. Groups of 3, wherever you want. Beautiful. He'll be here tomorrow. Yeah, yeah.
More minutes? Shall we wrap up? Anything to share to the whole group? Doesn't have to be long, or you don't have to, but I'm curious. Oh, yes, thank you. Anyone to share? Yes.
Okay, this is, I'll move the mic around. Sorry, HyeRan, I didn't hear your question.
Oh, anything to share from the group to the whole group? Some insights, stories,
Anybody would like to comment?
more questions,
I'll go.
anything.
Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, okay, John, hang on. Sorry, we got to do this. And people online, we know you're there. I hope you're, let us know if there's trouble.
Yes.
Well, we really appreciated you making this story personal, and we could all identify with it. We all had crossings,
Yeah.
and we all knew it was God, not us, but us and God doing it. So thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Here you go. Yeah.
My question is more why we wrote off Hagar and Ishmael in the Bible. Like it's as though, their story is not included anywhere. I find that curious.
Yeah. So, the suspicion is because often when it's an interpretation, right? It's a story. And then the next generation somehow they interpret in such a way. So St. Paul's letter in Galatians, you should read that, chapter 4. It's so obvious that we as a Christian has to be associated with Sarah and not Hagar. And why? That's a very good question. Other than perhaps that had to do with the race and that had to do with the slavery, right? And so nobody wants to be a slave. But it was her choice? No, right? In the same way, people of Israel, or Hebrew people, we say, the Exodus, right? They are not one race or one ethnic group. It was a whole bunch of people who were forced to be the slave. They are born as a slave to that Egypt, that empire at that time, for 400 years, right? And so when we say Hebrew people, it's a whole bunch of people. And what the beautiful thing about the whole story, the foundation of biblical story, is that God is God of freedom, and that God desire to stop those bondage. And those bondage could be literally exploitation of economic, but it could be other bondages, right? That is oppressive, that is basically not life-giving at all. So it's ironic, isn't it, that they are the people who became free, right, and then create a new community. But then we went back to the bondage and oppress certain group people, exclude certain other people. So yeah, it's interesting. And yet, Pam, yeah, and yet in Islam, so Islam, in terms of the religious history, Judaism is the oldest sibling. I want to say they are the eldest in terms of the old, right? And then Christianity, and then Islam was later than Christianity. So it's the youngest sibling. And for that, in their Quran, interestingly, it's Hagar and Ishmael that are so revered. Again, why? I don't know. But it that sense of interpretation, I think. So what we want to do, especially with Islamophobia as well as a Christian kind of superiority in this world, that we need to rediscover the story in the Bible that actually God didn't. And later, when Abraham was blessed, like God says, I will bless those who are blessing each other, but I will curse if those who are cursing the others. So in other words, therefore, we should not harm or curse anybody just because they are different, right? And especially if they are already marginalized, then part of our job is to be in solidarity so that they can belong, just like everyone else, right? That's the part of the faithful journey. So thank you for that. Good question. I don't know, but keep back. But, early so-called church fathers, they are the earliest kind of theologians in Christianity, and they had their very limited and biased, because we are all biased, way of looking at the scripture, and painted certain bad and others good. So, and right now, all kinds of xenophobic and racist and homophobic, transphobic, all those phobia is in some ways in our own traditions, not 21st century phenomenon. It's a long legacy that we have to unpack, unlearn, and then reestablish, right? It's both and. It's a very, very good news, and then there are some very, very bad news. And we have to still wrestle with both rather than throwing one thing and then only adapt others.
Not as much a question as kind of an experience. I'm just starting to re-explore spirituality, I suppose. So I've never read the Bible, and I hadn't heard this story before. But personally, I think her intersectionality and our new kind of exploration of social justice in the contemporary world, it really speaks to me that her story would be coming more at the forefront of Sarah's, because we live in a world where I feel like you never have the ideal. Even if you are blessed with as much privilege as possible in your current environment, you are less likely to be able to explore life in such a linear pattern as Sarah did, and you're more likely to experience those questions and trials and tribulations that Hagar had experienced. Like when she left the home and was in the wilderness pregnant. I mean, I think a lot of us can relate to that in the sense that, what are we going to choose? Are we going to choose potential death for my child or myself? Or are we going to take the lesser of two evils and go back to a home that isn't ideal because it provides us with as much equity as we can get at the time?
Indeed.
And so I appreciate
Excellent.
learning the story. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Indeed, I'm glad that you didn't read the Bible. That's the point. Because otherwise it's too boring. I already know the story. What are you telling? So that's good. Thank you for sharing. That's a great insight. And, in you reading a womanist theologians, Hagar appear everywhere. It's one of the most important. So talk about intersectionality, triple oppressions. I mean, how do you capture that? And right there in the first book of the Bible, it shows it, right? And so it's awesome.
Do you want to?
One more?
One more, and then we'll go. One more, Robin.
What I want to say is that I think what struck me is that this is the beginning of the Bible.
Yes.
And then time goes on, we change things. And the message is that women are important, we have a story to tell, and that people have difficult situations. And she's viewed as someone very important in the Bible. Then time goes on, and eventually when Christ appears in the Bible and becomes part, he tells the same story.
Indeed.
He talks to the woman at the well. He talks to women and speaks to women in the Bible. And it doesn't matter about their status, their color, or anything else. He's there for them. So the love of God and the love of Christ is shown to be together in through this.
Excellent. Indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll invite you to do. So you're going to do one more and then we're going to do a break. Is that right?
Yes, that's the idea. So let's go on to the second story. So keep imagining about this person this time. Do you know where your name came from? John, Robin, Pam, you have your name. HyeRan, my name. I have always been curious about my friends' names and also wondered to myself, what meaning does each of their names carry? As a map is important in finding unknown and unfamiliar places, names are important to find one's life journey, history, and one's own identity. My dad, Moses, named me. And this name reflects his life journey more than my life. He was an alien or foreigner or a stranger in a strange land. He escaped the place he grew up in Egypt and met my mom, Zipporah, in Midian. For my dad, my mom's home became his home, although he was never fully at home, even though he's absolutely grateful to my mom's people for their generous, radical hospitality. Actually, we had to go back to his home, Egypt, because he had to lead his people to freedom, who have been in captivity for 400 years. He's kind of a hero. He faced the merciless emperor and bravely demanded that let my people go. I'm very proud of my dad, but I'm equally proud of my mom and my grandfather, who supported my dad when he discerned about his decision to go back to his home and face the Pharaoh. It was not easy, I know, for him and for us as well. Because of his decision, my mom and I, with my younger brother, had to leave our familiar home and venture into something unknown. But we support and we admire our dad, who played such a remarkable, courageous leadership role for justice and freedom. As I said, I'm a mom's boy. I love my mom. She is a strong woman, loyal to my dad. She raised us so well, almost like a single mom. I have to share something, the most remarkable thing that happened to me and my dad because of her. It happened on the journey back to Egypt from Midian. It was a long journey going back to my dad's hometown. The road was tough and rough and dangerous. We had to endure a lot of hardship. We stayed at an inn along the road, but it's not even inn like anything like it. It's almost like a makeshift shelter and gave an overnight rest for strangers and animals. Even though the place was rough and difficult, I was so tired, I fell asleep. Apparently, in the middle of the night, I had no idea, but in the middle of the night, my dad felt that somebody was gonna kill him. He had some kind of seizure. And for some reason, my mom knew that. And very quickly, she knew what to do to save his life, avoid the risk of death to my father. Without any delay, she just did something. And that was to circumcise me. What a shock to the system. I was asleep. I was so much in pain. But soon after that, I was wide awake, of course. Strange enough, my dad is released from the seizure and all fine. Somehow, I didn't see it, but the angel of God that was invisible to everyone else, but my mom somehow saw it. She is a hero and saved my dad's life there. Few years later, I became the adult, and I just really want to know more about what happened that night. So I said, tell me, what happened? How did you know? The mom said, even though your dad lived in a foreign place, he is a Jew. In the Jewish tradition, every baby boy is supposed to be circumcised after they were born in 8 days. It means you are also a Jew. Unfortunately, we didn't do that in Midian. But now we know that is not a negotiable ritual. Therefore, we have to go through. By this blood and through this ritual, you join and extend the family. By this ritual, my dad reclaimed his identity as a Jew and was able to confidently and legitimately lead his people. By this circumcision, my mom restored my dad's covenantal faithfulness to his people and his God. In this physical, symbolic act, we are all confirmed being in the right relationship with God. Don't you think my mom is so awesome? Very wise. And so respectful of different cultures. In retrospect, I believe that her ability to do such a ritual came from growing up in a household where making one's identity is important. After all, her dad, Jethro, is a Midian priest. She has watched her father perform such meaningful rituals, marking and affirming different people's identities through rites of passage. My mom was able to sense the spirit world. Even though her religion, her skin color, her language were very different from my dad's Jewish religion and culture, their commitment to one another and respect for another's differences were so strong that my dad was able to accomplish a big, big task. When we got back to Egypt to face the emperor Pharaoh, it was very, very dangerous. It was literally a war situation. And to lead us away from the war was the only course to survive. So my mom made a difficult decision to return to her home with us so that we will be safe. Returning home back to Midian was very long, sad, and difficult. My dad was so sad and disappointed, but totally understand and believed that my mom's strength and wisdom. He also knew that she will get support from her dad, my grandfather. After the successful exodus, my grandfather said, "Let's go and see your dad." So he accompanied me and my younger brother and my mom go to meet my dad and his people who escaped Egypt, and they are in the wilderness. We stayed with them for many, many, many days and met amazing people who went through so much and yet so full of hope. My grandfather was a really wise elder with a seasoned experience of leadership, gave very helpful advice to my dad. Now he has to lead people, govern, and serve people as they try to start a new life, a new community, and a new place. So after a good visit, it was time for my grandfather to return to his home. Again, it was another time to say goodbyes for my family. I realized that war and injustice were the main reasons that my family had to be kept apart. I also know that despite the challenges ahead, there were so many generous and brave people to embrace differences and who strive to co-dwell together in peace. Most of all, God is with us. All these up and down adventures of our family journey, God always accompanied us. And because of my lived experiences, I met so many amazing migrants and people who cross differences and boundaries. And I can relate to them, and if I can, I will support them. I miss my granddad, but I feel his presence, and we are still connected. We are never apart. Do you know my name? Ta-da! His name is, or my name is Gershom, meaning wanderer. It came from the situation of my dad, Moses, who wandered and crossed so many borders and boundaries. Do you know my brother's name? His name is Eliezer, meaning the God who delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh, reflecting my dad's Exodus experience. You see, the name really means something and captures our journeys together. So if you want to learn more about me and my family, please open the Bible and Exodus 2, 4, and 18. Have another little chat. Next, similar questions and so on. Yeah, so share your name. I know there are several Johns here, for example, but but it might be a middle name or last name that is telling about you, your unique identity, or anything else about this story. This is Exodus story, but you know, as always, people tell the story from Moses. Have you heard about the son or Zipporah? So this is, anyhow, another 10 minutes to those.
This, and then we'll take a break. So we'll do this, some questions, and then take a break.
2 more minutes?
Okay, I'm going to ask you if there's similar question, any comment? I'll go up this side of the room because the other side's talked a bit. There you go.
Hi. I'm thinking of your telling of that story has made me think of a story of someone who's part of our congregation, whose story she's willing to let me tell. I have permission.
Oh,
and what jumped out at me as a parallel to this contemporary story I know firsthand through this person in the congregation is this matter of family separation. So the themes of separation and of safety.
yeah.
And also of making it up as you go along.
Yes.
That you don't, there isn't a 5-year plan.
No.
There isn't a 10-year plan. It's, okay, we're in this circumstance. How do we make it up? And how do we know what to do? How do we stay safe? And the story is of someone whose initials are KT, so I'll call her Katie. And she had to flee Nigeria. There was gender-based violence. She is orientation diverse. She had to flee, left her children with her sister. 3 children, the youngest of whom is 4. And they had to be parted for the safety not only of the woman who's here, but the safety of her children to not be associated with Katie's story. And so there they were with Katie's sister, who was then killed. I want to protect you from the story, but this is what happened. And so the kids then were on their own and are still on their own. And they were supposed to be able to join their mother in 3 months. I'm thinking of being in Midian. I'm thinking of this movement to go to somewhere to stay safe, and yet the family bonds are so strong. The children are 4 and 10 and 14, and they've been taken in by a church in Abuja. They're allowed to live in what really amounts to a broom cupboard, and they're really on their own there. So how is this being managed? So here's the mom here who prays with them by phone. This is what they do. They pray together each day by phone. And she's waiting. She thought it would be 3 months till they'd be coming. The way that things have slowed down in Canada, she's been told it will be 60 months, 60 months. And her youngest child is 4, so you can imagine this. So there is a connection that has not been broken. The mother is with the children, in a sense, every day. They prayed together. What will they do? Someone in the church has decided to look after them. They were told they had to leave. We can't look after these children. They're on their own. It's not our responsibility. And someone has stepped up and is getting food to the children, has helped them get into school and so on. So there is just making it up as you go along, 3 months turning into 60, and yet the family bonds are there, and the trust in God is beyond anything I can imagine.
That's right. Yeah.
My children will be okay. My children will be with me someday. I'm mourning this, but I trust God to find a way. I find this story so inspiring that somehow through the sense of God being with us all, the bonds have not been broken, even though the distance is there.
Right. Yeah, and unknown. realities.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So maybe that church in the Bunja is like grandfather Zedro in this story, isn't it? And some others who will support and make the children come here. When that happens, I think you should have a huge celebration of some sort, making a great ritual for marking that reunion. But heartbreaking story. Thank you for telling me.
Somebody else?
Us.
Yep. I'll let you pass this over.
For the online participants, good to have the microphone on. Yes.
Hello. We never got to question 3, so I'm just going to ask you what maybe you might comment about what you think about ritual in the light of especially the rituals of this story.
Well, so, in some ways that the ritual of the circumcision is not our Christian ritual, yet it really marks the people of faith of that tradition, so essential. Similar to, I guess, Christian baptism, but when you think about baptism, that's very similar to Jewish tradition. So this is where I told about 3 siblings, religion of the Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. There are so many similarities because we kind of learn from and then adopt our own and then move on. Kind of the confirmation is similar too. So in my view, why, and some of you might think about differently, but religion or practice of faith is not a cognitive, heady act, right? It has to be holistic of our learning about intellectually, cognitively. It's important, very, very important. But then it also has to feel, to relate to, and you have to use I use head, heart, and hands, meaning it also has to be physical. Why food sharing is important, not just because it's an important theologically or cognitively, but it's actually physical act, right? That the physical body and using our mouth and our hands and our all kinds of way. So in my view, I think, and when you say, contemporary prayers or, prayer as a protest or whatever there may be, that's, to me, is a ritual. Is a intentional, communal act that signify, that reflects, that deepen what we know, what we want to go deeper, as this series says. So, so in other words, in terms of the respect of other religious rituals, I mean, I don't know why that circumcision is important, right? It's not why, but that we recognize it. So this text is a really bizarre text. And so many Hebrew scripture scholars and Jewish biblical scholars are pondering upon why this happened. And this is one interpretation. But I want you to imagine, what if you are Zipporah and you saw that, and somehow this might be the case. And it's a little deep religious literacy as well, right? That she knew that this is important and so on. So thank you.
One more?
One more?
Anybody? Comment or question? Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, we're right at 10:30, so we'll take 15 minutes. So there's fabulous food there. Washrooms are down here, go left. We'll come back and we'll do 2 more, and then we're done for the day. And so thank you. Make sure you meet people you don't know. There's food, washrooms, and we'll take 15 minutes and we'll call you back. Thanks so much.
And for online, take a little
Yeah.
All-purpose break. Yeah.
Thank you. 15 minutes.
fellowship. So, two more stories. We're going to move to, the hint is the New Testament now. Okay? So feel free to eat and drink as we settle back in. So another story. It's a first-person narrative. I had a great trip to Jerusalem. I had an official duty to visit this place. I do this regularly as I work for the Queen of Ethiopia. I am responsible for her entire treasury. That is quite a responsibility. I hold a high-ranking position in the ruling house of Ethiopia, the house of Queen Candace, a dynasty of Ethiopian queens. Well, I don't want to boast about myself too much, but I am very good at finances, and I am good at reading Greek. I love reading scriptures. I'm so interested in learning more about the God that Jewish people worship. I am a religious person, and you might say I'm intellectually curious and spiritually seeking. On this last visit to Jerusalem, I went to the temple. I always do. But I could not enter the temple and worship there. As a Gentile, I'm not welcomed beyond the court of the Gentiles. I'm sad that I cannot fully belong. I'm also an eunuch, and I'm excluded from the assembly of God's people. Apparently, that is the law in Deuteronomy. But I know that I'm not alone in being excluded. There are many people in your day, too, who are excluded because they are identified as trans, intersex, genderqueer, or non-binary. I still had a great visit, and now I'm going back to Ethiopia. I'm very thankful to my driver and my horses. He's an excellent driver and handles all the horses very well so that I can ride and read. It was the text of the prophet Isaiah reading loud in Greek when I saw someone running along beside me. It was on the road from Jerusalem and Gaza. This person heard me recite the Isaiah text and asked me, "Do you understand what you are reading?" I replied, "How can I unless someone guides me?" "Do you want to teach me?" His name was Philip. And guess what? He says, "Yes, of course." So I invited him to get in and sit beside me in my chariot. Now, the passage of the scripture that I was reading was about a marginal Jew who would be cut off from the land of the living, who would be excluded, and in shame and humiliation, he would die for the sake of others. I asked Philip, "About whom, may I ask you, does the prophet say this? About himself or about someone else?" He responded that it is a passage about a person whose name is Jesus. Then Philip told me all about this person, Jesus. The most remarkable thing that he said is that I can follow Jesus. I can belong to a community despite that I'm a Gentile and I'm unique. I couldn't believe my eyes. Is that possible? It's not the law breaking or anything? And Philip told me, no. You just need to be baptized in the name of Jesus and follow his teaching of radical love, serving and loving God and loving your neighbors. the loving neighbors, the people who are different from yours, by transgressing so many differences. Then I saw water on the road, and I said, look, here is water. What is to prevent me from being baptized? I had my driver stop the chariot, and Philip and I went down into the water, and Philip baptized me. Oh my goodness. You have no idea how moving I was. That experience. It was beyond description. I felt like I'm a new person. I was born again. The water was very cold, but I felt warmth, surrounded by the love and the care of the one who embraced me, accept me, and affirm me that I am beloved. Then guess what? I came out of the water and Philip is gone. I have no idea where he went. But I believe this whole thing was somehow Spirit at work. God, through the Spirit, enabled me to encounter Philip, and somehow Philip was there, and now Philip was gone. I know God called me to do amazing things with my power, with that my position, and as a being Gentile and eunuch, there are things that I can do for the sake of God's kingdom. After I came home with such joy and excitement, I kept reading the book of Isaiah and found the following. And this is in Isaiah 56, verse 4 and 5. For says the Lord to the eunuch who keeps my Sabbaths, who chooses the things that please me and hold fast my covenant, I will give in my house and within my walls a monument and a name better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. You see, the prophet is talking about me, talking about people like me. What is the point of all this? God is amazing, an amazing thing, using people like me to draw the circle wide so that all living creations can belong. So to do so, I have to keep practicing those God's radically inclusive love and extending welcome, acceptance, and ensuring full participation in God's salvation. Do you know and you want to know more about me and Philip and what happened? Then open the book and read Acts chapter 8, verses 26 to 40. So back to my role here as HyeRan speaking. So next, so this is a little academic references that you might want to check out. So very amazing theologian, Willie James Jennings, who wrote a Bible commentary on Acts. And in that chapter that I just shared with you, he said, God has come for the eunuch precisely in his difference and exactly in the complexities of his life. He matters, not because he is close to worldly power and thus more appealing pawn. He simply matters, and he is doing and being brought to close. And then queer theologian Lynn Mary Tonstad argues about this text. Based on this story in Acts, it is simply absurd to have debates about whether trans and gender non-conforming people can be included in the church. They have been in the church all along. God made that happen. Isn't that awesome quote? And that's probably why there is so much joy in this story. The eunuch went on his way rejoicing, Acts testify. And joy, in Greek is a chara. It's always a companion of grace, charis, charisma, charis. So whenever there is grace, there is joy. Whenever there is joy, there is grace. Joy is a response to God's work of grace and love and justice in the world. Shall we chat a little bit? 10 minutes about this story? Yeah. Formal group again. And if you knew this story, what did you find difference? If you don't know this story, then what are the kind of things that you can relate to in terms of stigmas and prejudices? And how powerful this person in the story that we have. Again, he's from Ethiopia. So again, it's intersectional of race and sexual orientation. But he's not just a marginalized victim. He's got a position of power. So that's good news too. Okay, maybe 10 minutes.
Okay, we'll invite you back. I wonder if people would like to say something from your group. Or ask HyeRan a question. Okay. Who would like to ask a question or make a comment? Anybody? Anybody? You guys are all talking.
I know, it was
Which is
a lot
good.
of good talk.
Sorry, I'll come over here.
Well, I'll just say that I think that with respect to the first question, we've all felt that we have not belonged and that we've been alone, just like the eunuch, and that there was no chance for us ever to belong. And then with respect to the third, that we could find a place of belonging in our church and our community.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm down here, so somebody mind. What are you folks talking about?
Rude. I didn't ask for this.
It's called voluntold.
Oh, okay. For the third question, we were talking about what can we do as a community, and sorry, yep. And we were talking about how, as a community that is generally part of the dominant culture and in a place of comfort and power, the first step is always to put ourselves in a place where we're not the dominant culture, we're not comfortable, and we just have to listen and learn. And that takes a lot of work because you have to find those, you have to go looking.
That's right.
And you have to be willing to just be uncomfortable and not have a response.
Yes.
And it doesn't make you look good.
Right.
It's not about saying, I'm welcoming, you can come into my space where I make the rules. But yeah.
Anybody else?
I mean, it's hard to imagine in the shoes of eunuch in some ways, personally. But, he had significant power. Yet, the way that he engaged with Philip was such a humbling. Don't you think? Like, I'm eager to learn. I don't know everything. So that itself, I think, is very liberating story. But also, I gather from your congregation's expanding ministries with asylum seekers, and most of whom are coming from Africa region. And the fact that this story is from Ethiopia is really also powerful, right? And in terms of the LGBTQ issues, United Church has got a still long way to go. But in comparison to other Christian denominations, both in Canada and beyond, I think we are leading this journey. But it also gets really difficult when some people say, oh, that's a white agenda. That's white liberal Christian agenda. And we have a different cultural, whatever, norms and traditions so that we all know. So it's a kind of a racial cultural war in addressing the LGBTQ issue. And so it's very hard to then respect and listen and still finding the way to work together. So I hear your, and to do that, you have to be in a very difficult and uncomfortable seat, right? And that's hard because you are so convinced and yet some are not yet. And so how do we rather demonize them or we know better than you are, right? And that's often also very dangerous move for those who are so-called liberal and educated, thinks that we know better, right? And yet, we are leading it. So how do we celebrate and affirm that? And we still got a work to do. And how do we really understand them in such a way that their turn to God is actually happening, right? So this story is remarkable in that regard, I think.
The word that came to mind when you were just talking was the word vulnerable.
Yes.
I think that we aren't used to being vulnerable, especially if we're part of the dominant culture.
Yes. Yes.
And so, like, if we're talking about queer spaces, it means for me as a straight person being willing to go into a space where I am vulnerable. I don't know the culture. I don't know what's okay for me to say and what's not okay for me to say.
Yeah.
And I'm learning.
Yes.
And I don't have an answer for
No.
anything, basically.
Yeah.
But choosing that when you're used to only ever being
Yes.
not vulnerable is
Oh, that's beautiful indeed. And I think that is not just for the LGBTQ, right? Anywhere, right? And so as a white person coming to Korean community and they are speaking in Korean and you probably don't have any clue what they're saying, and yet still being able to be there and then make friendship, and that is huge. So I'm just saying it as one example, but there are so many other spaces, right? That's hard. And the other thing is, it's hard to do it regularly. You can do one, and then I did it, and then moving on, and back to the comfort seat. People with a privilege have that choice. And often we do that by default. I'm as guilty of yours. But can we do it regularly? And that's the practice that I'm talking about earlier, and kind of ritual. Ritual is not ritual unless you keep doing it, right? It's like in your muscle, like brushing teeth. You don't think about it, you just do it. So how do we do that kind of radical encounters, being okay to not know and being corrected because you kind of blew it, right? Because you made mistakes. And yet being corrected, being challenged, but still being accepted into that community. And often vulnerable, marginalized communities are so gracious. I often find that with the indigenous communities. It's unbelievable. Like they shouldn't talk to me and just spat on it, right? You settlers. But they are not. And so where is that generosity and graciousness coming from? And then I realized that if they so-called hate the rest, there's no way forward either for them. So for the life affirming and giving, somehow reconciliation, forgiveness, building new kind of friendship has to happen. But people with privilege have a lot more to do. And by default, we can choose not to. We can. But those who are in the vulnerable, they don't have a choice, but keep going, crossing, and trying to belong. Yeah. So thank you very much. Yes, sorry, yeah.
It just brings into mind the statement of, checking your privilege when you walk in the door. If you're going to a marginalized community, remembering that you're never the expert in that community. You're always walking in there with, your heart in your hand.
Yes.
And willing to listen, willing to have humility and learn from the community, and then find a bridge to cross.
Yes.
To go back and forth,
Yeah.
I think. And I think that helps the privileged people be able to do the work in a continuous fashion without it feeling like I can turn this off and on when I want to.
Yeah.
I think that's what that is brought to mind.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Building bridges and being the bridge. Mm-hmm. Great.
One more and then we'll do the next one. Yep. Okay.
Oh,
John,
there are
I'm
three.
gonna
My experience of this, about 2 or 3 years ago, we used to meet for lunch in the gym over here. And I met with a couple, one morning, and he was a professor at religious school here, and she was a person of color, and they were together. And they said they didn't think they could come here because there were no people of color here.
Right.
And I felt, well, I grew up with people of color in my background. Anyway, now, and I thought we can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
Like, we are not supposed to go out and invite people of color because that's not the way you do it. But they discovered us. And they discovered us about 2 years ago. And there were 7 of them, and then there were 11 of them. And now there's about 100.
80, I heard.
Yeah. But
Amazing.
But they didn't belong here until the church reached out to them.
Yeah.
They reached out here. We reached back with a committee of people who understood we need to connect with these people.
Yes.
And get to know them. And now they're becoming a part of our congregation. So that's the way belonging
I think
works.
so. Yes, indeed. Thank you. Thank you. And Pam, and then John. And then we'll go to the final story.
So about the third question, I think so much is done in this church to welcome people of very diverse backgrounds. But one thing I think that's missing are regular small groups. And many churches do that, and have certain people identified that can welcome people into their home and so on, to get to know each other's story, but to continue the welcoming and to build community.
Yeah.
And I think it would be an asset.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe this is a question for right at the end. I'm not sure. It's to do with prejudice. I was wondering, over the last 2 years, the Palestinian-Israeli situation created many conflicts at university campuses, among other places, with demonstrations and sit-ins and so on. So I just wondered so this is a question for you, but if you, the Emmanuel College or the TST, in the last 2 years ago, 1 year ago, did you have to deal with conflict and prejudice among various groups with regard to that issue?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you subscribe Broadview magazine? I actually was asked to reflect on the very thing that, John, you are raising. So I wrote a little piece. So hopefully you might be able to find that. And it was a very vulnerable writing. And to be honest with you, I wrote a lot, but that was the hardest writing. Because it's a very good journalism that they have to also vet. So they reach out to Jewish folks, they reach out to Palestinian folks, and to make sure and all that. So the whole process was incredibly, personally very challenging, and I remember tears among our communities, way more than ever. And then like unspeakable in some ways, and became, when you say A, it became politicized. So even very notion of the peace was charged, so it was really difficult. So as I told earlier about school becoming multi-religious and doing really well, relatively speaking, but when real difficult conflict came on, we are on the test, whether we can actually belong. So it was very hard. And yet, again, because we had Jewish students among ourselves whose family and friends were killed by the Hamas attack, we had way more in numbers Muslim students some of them are from Palestine, And some of them are Turkey and near Egypt and so on, so very neighboring countries that they are totally implicated. And some of the students had lost 40, 50 family members. So it was so raw and so difficult to even understand what's going on, let alone kind of critical reflection of how we can do this. And while, as you noted, that encampments was happening in our campus as well as other schools, and what's the point of having taking sides? Because it's almost like, I often say as a mother, which finger is less hurting? So the finger is my children, right? Is the thumb is hurting more than baby finger, right? We have to hold them together. So it was really important to listen and hold the space so that grief and anger and coping with what's happening, just sharing that itself was difficult. I think we are still having a hard time to talk across so that folks from, more pro-Palestinians and pro-Israel or, that act were able to listen well. But I think this is ongoing, isn't it? It's not ever done. And the attack was really shocked, but between the conflict in that region, it's been centuries, right? So my own way of looking at it is that, we talked about humility, we talked about consistent work, but the other thing is patience. In other words, things are not going to change overnight. And especially when that conflict was so deeply and long held that it's not going to change anytime soon, except that we have to keep working on it. And so I think part of the good news out of all this terrible situation is that I think students and faculty and staff and our alumni included were able to really recognize how hard it is to listen and how hard it is to have less privileges and being open. That my thought today might be changed thanks to the wisdom and insights and experiences of others. And ultimately, we all long for peace and be able to stay together, right? So the kind of way of listening and speaking, even writing, because there are so many social media feeds that were so unhelpful, but it's written and it's out there, and so it was hard to undo. So all those things that are important for ministry and professional work, right, in their career path. So those are important, and I think there are some movements happening, so intentionally Jewish and Muslim with Christian and other folks intentionally learning how to talk difficult conversations. It's kind of, and it's called Building Bridges. It's the kind of seminar that's happening across Toronto, different schools, and also within the university, the kind of EDI, diversity department, that this part of topic, because there are multiple topics, and this particular topic is ongoing. So in other words, it's not going to be done, right? So we have more like a standing committee doing this kind of work. So, and then some others who are from other conflicts like Sudan and, Myanmar and, some Latin Americas. I mean, their conflicts are not even reported in the media, right? But if you are from that communities and had a connection, then what about our story? So it's almost like, I call the identity politics of Olympics, right? And so whose story is more important? Whose issue is more important? And so we have to also hold that. So when we are sharing this and deepen this conversation, whose stories we are not paying attention to. Yeah, so it's not easy, but thank you for question that. And I want to say it's a real leadership challenges, but also real privilege to be a part of that, navigating and leading that. So, ready for the final? Okay. So this is not a test. I'm just going to say out loudly. We're going to talk about Jesus' family. But I'm going to share a story from Mary and the story from Joseph about certain things that happened. So this is a story about a couple and their child. This is a perfect story for our season now, Epiphany, because it's a story about God being revealed in darkness by the light of the star in the night sky. So let me tell you the story from Mary and Joseph's point of view. So I'm speaking as Mary here. I was born and grew up in a small town. Our region was an occupied territory, and as a result, life was quite difficult. This imperial government, the Roman Empire, took away our grain and our harvest as a form of taxation. But as a person of faith, I believe in God who would liberate our people and our country. There was a puppet leader, King Herod, who bowed down to Roman Empire, but he's afraid of God. Being a girl, my life was full of challenges. Living in a patriarchal society, my life had no future unless I was married. By the time I became a teenager, I was already engaged. One day, something so strange happened. An angel appeared and told me that I would bear a child. It was so extraordinary news, absurd. Here is what I heard. Greetings, favored one, God is with you. Do not be afraid, for you have found favor with God, and now you will conceive in your womb and bear a child. He will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High. I could not believe what I just heard. I asked, how can that be, since I'm a virgin? The angel assured her that it was the work of the Spirit and that I would be fine and I could go visit my cousin Elizabeth, who is also pregnant. And that was another miracle story itself. And together we would be supported as sisters. Yes, that was an incredibly difficult story to hear, an unbelievable story, but I thought this news was hopeful. And it was news that my people have been waiting for, a Messiah who would come and save us. So I say yes and accepted this news and my destiny that is going to change my life forever. But I had to tell my fiancé, Joseph, and worries about how he would take it. To my surprise, he said he also had the angel appearing to him in his dream and share the same message. So now Joseph. It's difficult to be married and to be responsible for a household in a normal circumstance. But now I heard this news, and according to our law, a woman who is pregnant before marriage will be heavily punished. I did not want this to happen to my fiancée Mary. I did not want her to suffer from the gossip either. I also did not want our child labeled as someone born out of the wedlock. But we had to grapple with this unbelievable news and a totally new reality. Because I believed in God and what Angel told me, I felt responsible and wanted to protect Mary and the baby in her womb. You know, I am a good carpenter. So I decided to build the house very quickly before the baby was born. People in town slowly but surely accepted our family. Some people even congratulated us when our baby was born, and they helped us. Then there is this called Magi. The scholars from the East also visited, which was very, very special. They brought gifts and praised our baby. They paid a very respectful visit. They looked different. They spoke different languages. I don't know who they are really, but I felt that their visit was so meaningful and genuine. I asked them how they found about our place and our baby. They told that they read the stars, they studied the stars. And when our son was born, somehow that star was so brightly shining that they had to visit, find out what's going on. And they also heard about the rumor that our son will save people from the Roman Empire. So we had a really busy and joyful few weeks, and my wife was recovering well from giving birth, and the baby was very healthy. But then we heard that the King Herod heard about this visit of the Magi, and then about the king, real king. So then he was totally scared. He believed in the Messiah as a Jewish guy and coming as an infant. So he got scared, and that would be, if that is true, then he would be losing all his power, right? So he was looking for our son Jesus and somehow get rid of this thing, right? So, as a head of the household, that we could not just sit still, that this King Herod is not going to do anything. In fact, he was going to do it. It's a kind of genocidal act. So our family had to escape. We fled to Egypt, a country that Herod had no control over. And this is irony, isn't it? Another imperial country, the country that enslaved our ancestors for so many years, and now they are the country that will hopefully welcome us to settle and safely live. So we lived in Egypt for almost 10 years until we heard the King Herod had died. So we decided to return to our country, but we are still very, very afraid of going back to Bethlehem where our kid was born because it might be still dangerous. Because the regime of Herod's son taken over the power, and they are still looking for our baby Jesus or our boy Jesus. So we settled instead in Nazareth in Galilee. So speaking of the Magi, I found them so brave because Herod, the King Herod, ordered them to come back to report. It's like today's ICE, right? To find and report. But somehow they managed to detour and sneak out of this site to save our son. They resisted the power with such cleverness. They are simply amazing. Mary. Our life in Egypt was good, relatively speaking. We received a good hospitality from local Egyptians. We made friends despite our cultural, racial, and religious differences. Our son Jesus grew up in a place where diverse people can thrive together. He learned how to embrace differences and respect others. It was very difficult to run away and escape, right? The violence and threat were real. However, I'm very happy and grateful that our son had this experience being a refuge and lived in a place that is unfamiliar to him. If he had grown up in a small town Bethlehem and lived with people who like them, who eat same food, doing the same thing, spoke the same language, and hang out with the very likely minded people, he would not have learned and took that kind of leadership that the world is needed to proclaim that kingdom of God. From that perspective of mom, as an educator, I see how critical, how formative this experience living away from home shaped his identity and his mission and his vocation. Thinking about what home means in this context, home is not just a birthplace, but also where we are now. Home is where we feel we belong. Home is where we find peace, where we experience acceptance and respect. Many of us nowadays live in a situation that forces us to leave home in search of safety from war, from poverty, from death, disaster, and persecution. We all yearn for belonging, and people embark on crossing to find home. From God's point of view, kingdom rather than kingdom, kin as in relationship, where the humble are lifted up and where the hungry stomachs are filled with food, and where the rich become empty. That's what I sang about my son and the world that we are aiming for. So that's the story. Yeah. So, one more little group discussions. So this is a really well-known story in some ways. I call Christmas story, it's an Epiphany story. But have you considered Jesus as a refuge, or Jesus' entire family as a refuge, who crossing and seek refuge in another strange person and people? And who are the Magi today? And how can our church, our faith communities, become the place where people feel at home? Let's have 10 more minutes.
Okay, we're going to have 10 minutes of conversation together and then we're done. So thank you where you are. Okay, comment. Who would like to say something or pose a question? And I'm going to ask somebody who hasn't already yet. Your group hasn't. Any guy wants? Okay, David? No, not yet.
Well, thank you. A wonderful theme for all of us in these times. One of the areas that we haven't really touched on yet and is close to my heart is our Indigenous issue. We've talked about reconciliation, especially as a big part of the problem over the last 150 years. The United Church, I think, was among the first to apologize for the genocide, at least the residential schools, perhaps not the genocide, but the government of Canada could take a lot of responsibility for that in the early days. But what does reconciliation look like when we are the very people that, I should say the churches, the Christian church has been a source of such harm in many cases. And I don't doubt that some of the Indigenous people would look upon our efforts as a second colonization if we invite them in. And so it's a very delicate issue. And as Tyrone was suggesting, maybe the Magi are not us. Maybe the Magi are some of the leaders in the Indigenous community that have risen above some of the pain and suffering and are currently actively working on reconciliation and learning from each other and trying to drop the blame and the shame. So it's just a reflection on the confusion that I feel about how to address the whole issue of reconciliation.
Thank you.
No answers, just a lot of questions.
But very, very profound.
How and where we do it.
The Magi as Indigenous people, what do you think about that? That's a beautiful theme for another sermon or another study. But so I really, really appreciate that. So let me tell you another story, and this is a real story. I hope that you visit Emmanuel College. So Emmanuel College has the kind of courtyard. So there's a building, and then behind there's a kind of very lovely yard where people look at the trees and whatnot. And that's where the crucified woman sculpture. So you Google crucified woman sculpture, you'll find the story. It's a marvelous stories, and there are PhD dissertations on it. And our first woman faculty member of Emmanuel, Doris Dyke, who was the first female professor in entire theological school in Canada. So she's remarkable. Another one of the trailblazers, and she actually wrote on this sculpture. Anyhow, it's really remarkable symbol, to talk about symbol, and so rituals are happening. And the sculpture, the artist didn't actually mean or intend this sculpture as a Christian symbol, although the crucified definitely resonates and evokes a Christian thing. But she really wants to address the suffering, okay? So this is where people gather with the Montreal massacre of the female engineering students in 1989, and also when missing mothers and women, the campaign was happening, that we gather as well, and then the kind of Orange Church Day, now we are using this. So it's an interesting place, right? The place with a sculpture had a certain legacy and intention, which is powerful because women's suffering is still very much part of, we have to struggle, yet it's go beyond. So I don't want to boast myself, but I want that place as an Indigenous healing garden. where the Emmanuel College is part of Victoria University, and as the name Victoria is that British Victoria, right? And so we have to hold our own legacy, good and bad, but we have to make indigenous relationship as a theological school also part of our big commitment. And yet, in the campus, there's no visual and visible indigenous symbols that this land belongs to them as much as we share, right? So we do the land acknowledgement, territorial, but it's almost lip service unless you actually make it. So that was my first, as a principal's goal, to make this garden into indigenous healing garden. And also, I'm very ecologically conscious person. That's my research and commitment to until I die. And so I don't like grass because it's a terrible thing. Sorry, I preach on that. Sorry for the grass, but it's not doing much for the rest of the creation. Use too much water and too much chemical, whatnot. So rather, we can have indigenous medicinal plants that are indigenous and habitable to this land, and it attracts bees and insects. It's much more robust, organically, ecologically fine and beautiful. And so that's what we did. And also the garden was inaccessible in some ways because it's like about this feet up. So unless you have a wheelchair issue, you can actually go down to the garden. So we made that accessible. So second entrance door and ramp and also it wasn't cheap, and still we are running fundraising and whatnot. But at least it shows it. This is an indigenous healing garden. This is a medicinal plants. And so from the beginning to the end, the journey was talking and speaking with indigenous elders and community members. And basically, this place they can use for whatever they need, well, for ceremonies, whatnot. During that conversation with the indigenous elder circles and the part of my team, and some people exactly ask that questions. There's no room for indigenous healing garden to have a crucified Christian symbol because Christianity did so much harm. And then the part of other groups said, there are indigenous who are Christian. And the gospel is still good for them, despite the harm. Not, regardless, right? And this symbol is not just about Christian either. And so it was a huge debate and conflict, right? Oh my gosh, what should we do? So Gaza is one, and then this one was another headache of mine. And in the meanwhile, we contract the architect firm, and they are not cheap. And it lengthened the conversation. So our contract had to be lengthened, so it's very costly. And so it was all these things happening. And this is I just love this story. But in order to, so architect firm, which was also indigenously very mindful people who are indigenous architect there, and so the whole thing was really indigenous informed, right? And the architect firm decided to examine, okay, if we remove this sculpture, where we go and how do we do it? So they did testing and check out all that. Then they find out that if this sculpture has to be removed, there is a birch tree, which is big and beautiful, was right beside that sculpture, has to be basically demolished as well. So in other words, in order to remove the sculpture, the tree has to be killed. And thank God that City of Toronto law said healthy tree cannot be killed. Sometimes law and policies are awesome. Awesome. And indigenous elders said, we love birch tree. Birch tree is sacred in our tradition. We cannot kill. Problem solved. So to me, I actually wrote about this, and the birch tree saved the day. It's not the human. Birch tree, God through the birch tree saved the day. And I was even imagine this birch tree was studied, like planted, almost at the same time as a sculpture. So they were partners. They've been talking and sharing their ideas. So you have to visit our college and visit that site. Is beautiful. So going back to your question, it is difficult. And how do we make a reconciliation real, not just lip service? And this is one of the small examples. And yes, we have to unlearn, challenge our Christian-centric oppression toward others, certainly including indigenous. But gospel is very paradoxical, right? Because like same thing with the African Americans. They weren't Christians. It was a white master converted them to Christianity. And guess what? African spiritual. They are the one who liberated, right? So gospel doesn't have borders, doesn't have boundaries. The good news will click to people's imaginations, and especially oppressed people, even though the way that it was introduced might be totally colonial and oppressive, right? And so indigenous people are struggling. So how do you become hybrid? Just like Moses' kid, right? It's a hybrid. It's a mixed, both. And you want to get rid of one identity in order to be the other? No, right? And so indigenous people have their own agencies. I don't have anything to do with Christianity. Fine. But some people say, Jesus is important to me. Christian communities, I learn a lot from whatever. And so they want to navigate their journey as a Christian, as indigenous, without get rid of the indigenous identities and spiritualities and their own wisdom. How do you combine those? That's a beauty. And so same thing for us as a Christians, if you are identify yourself as a Christian, following Jesus and their teaching, so on. But then we are living in this land and this place and learn from all kinds of wonderful spiritualities from indigenous people. And indigenous is not one thing, right? They are so diverse. I mean, there's so many languages, so many cultures, similarities, but different, right? And I have a faculty member who is Mohawk, and he said Mohawk is a warrior, and we don't like the other indigenous sometimes, so we fight as well. They are human too, right? And so knowing all these intricacies and complexities and particularities and deeply appreciating is part of, I think, reconciliation. And as I said earlier about how to coexist, I think that's the key for the kingdom of God, without losing one another. And apologies is needed, repentance is needed, but ultimately forgiveness is needed. Otherwise, they will have their own scars, will never resolved, right? Korean, we call that is han. And so unless you liberate from that han, you are not totally free. And you will not be completely healed either. So in their own journey, they have to do their part. And if we are allowed and joined to journey with them, we must, right? So, thank you.
One last one.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I've been led here from the Holy Spirit. John told me, he said, there's this lady who's going to come on January 31st. And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to go there and maybe I could learn some wisdom. But anyway, there's a lot of talk about, first of all, I want to thank you for to come to you. There's a lot of talk about the native people. Talk about this is their land and this is their land. But I was brought up in the wilderness. I was adopted by 2 native people that my mother gave me at birth. And I was in that wilderness for 8 years. I was the only kid there for 8 years. I got to learn about nature, the 4 seasons, how my guardians that believed in the Creator. I'm a kid. Now, I've been homeschooled for 8 years. And then finally, when I was about 8, they decided to take me to school. But before that, my mom took me to church when I was about 7 years old. And I got into this church. I was sitting in the back. All I could see, these white people's heads were down. And I said, wow. I says, these people are like the native people. They're humble. So anyway, I was there just that one time to go to that church. And then, but meanwhile, I learned all about nature. I learned the 4 seasons, how the food was given to us, how everything, and they kept moving from place to place. There was a house there. They never needed anything. I never saw money. So finally, when they took me to that school, you hear a lot about residential school. And I went to this school. There was a mission school. What do you know when you're 9, 10 years old? It's a school. Well, when I got out and started learning about the other race, other people, I found out that that residential school, I didn't know it was a residential school. You hear about all the negative things about what residential school did to other kids. However, I have native people, friends that brought me up. They were in residential school. And the one lady says, our school was really nice. So you don't hear about the good stuff. You only hear the negative stuff. Just like I don't believe in reading the newspapers because all you get is bombardment of negative stuff. So I've walked that humble path. When I finally got to school, I left when I was about 14, 15, because I used to walk 8 miles home for hockey practice. We didn't have a vehicle. Eventually they moved even further. I would catch a midnight bus. And I says, by the way, when I went to those first 2 years to that school, when I was in grade 2, they pulled me out of school with 2 months to go because my guardian used to do farm labor and stuff, and I never questioned when she said we had to do this. I just followed. So they took me in that 4 months to go do this farm labor, burning brush for 4 months. I just accepted for what it was, just like what I learned in nature. But anyway, I decided I was going to leave home about 14 or 15 so I could go to school and play hockey. That was my dream. And so when I went to town, I didn't question where I was going to live. I just went. So I stayed from place to place. People took me in. I didn't know. I never worried. But on the 10th year, when I was in grade 10, I got invited to go to Calgary at Christmas with a friend of mine. And then while I was there, the lady says to me, if you ever need a place, you can stay with us. Then I found out Calgary had a college with two years in I was in grade 10, I was going to be grade 11 and 12. Plus they had 2 years of college. I said, well, I can go play golf there. Now, when I skipped grade 2, I had to repeat it. And then I had this counselor that took me under her wing. And she said, Lloyd, because of your age, we're going to give you a college course. And if you pass, you can skip grade 12. Well, I passed and played there 2 years hockey, won championships. And then on my last year, we went to British Columbia to play an exhibition game. Who comes along? The registrar of Mount Royal. And he says, Lloyd, what are you going to do now? I says, well, I probably want to get a job. I'm going to go into social work. And he says, why don't you get a degree? Well, what do I know about a degree? However, I said, wow, I can go 2 more years and go play hockey in Minnesota. So, well, the thing that I'm really proud of, I supported myself through school, except my last 2 years, I got a student loan. But when I'm telling the story here, the path I've walked, and when I was in grade 7, I had this teacher, very strict Catholic teacher. He says, well, God's all powerful. And I says, just to tell you a little story, when I was 12 years old, an older teenager gave me half a pack of smokes to go smoke. And I was playing hockey, and I said, do I want to smoke or do I want to play hockey? I became a millionaire because I didn't smoke. But anyway, I learned to make those decisions. In those 8 years, I'd go and stuff like that. I learned from nature and stuff like that. So for me, to come in those woods and you hear about all the native things and stuff like that, for me, when I went to that residential school, I'm so proud that residential school gave me a chance to get an education. And then I had other siblings. Some of them, once I left home, I never looked back. And then they said, one of them says, you know, you can get a scholarship for $10,000 if you've been a day scholar. And I said, how can I take $10,000 when so many kids didn't have a chance, God, whatever happened to them? And then somebody says to me, well, you know what, you can take that $10,000 and you can give it away. So the first $3,000, I gave it to my siblings, and the rest I just give away. When you listen to the Bible says you should do 3 things. You should look after the poor, you should look after the widows, and the fatherless. Well, guess who is fatherless? I grew up without a father. I grew up without a biological mother. However, when my teacher, when I was in grade 10, stayed with him, I would go visit her, and I says, you know what? I always follow my heart. Oh, she says, I was 50 years old, and she says, oh, that's the Holy Spirit in you. Well, I've been blessed because just like today, the Holy Spirit, I was listening to my heart. I followed it. Today, she led me here. You're not going to believe this. I'm sitting over there, and I said, on the way there, I said, well, I'm going to learn wisdom, and maybe I'll get to see the lady. I'm in that corner, and she comes to me. Hi, Lloyd. I said, how'd you know my name? So we got talking away. Here she is, the leader. But anyway, I could go on and on, but I've been coming to this church for the last 4 years. And the reason why I come here, because John speaks my language. And you talk about home, this has been my home. I've gone to many churches, and this is where I come from. But today I was led here from the Holy Spirit, and I'm really glad to be able to speak about the native, because the native people don't know, they believe in the Creator. And they didn't read the Bible, but they learned from nature. And everything has been given to me from the higher power. Thanks, John.
That's great. Thank you, John and Lloyd.
Thank you, Lloyd. Well, my understanding is nature is the first scripture, Lloyd. Okay, we are at our time. I wonder if you would show appreciation for.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, it's been amazing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank the people who've been online. We're at our mark, finish at noon. I want to thank Elaine, if she's still in the room, maybe not, but the food was brought, and she and Nancy. Tomorrow at 9 and at 10:45, we'll be here in worship. We welcome you online, folks, and people here. Thank you for taking time to learn stories, to be in conversation with others as we continue our journey. And I thank you for being the principal at Emmanuel College, my alma mater. I was there when they placed the crucified women.
Oh, really?
And Doris Dyke was a professor, etc.
Yes.
So anyway, thanks for being here, and we appreciate your support. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
HyeRan's here if you'd like to have a conversation.